Hi everybody, my name is Charissa Riddle,
And Miguel Escobedo.
and we're going to talk about design choices and perceived quality. So what we were trying to find out in our research was really how visual and functional design choices can impact usability and a person's perceived quality of the experience. Both Miguel and I work for an e-commerce company, and we make these type of choices every day in what we do. And we thought it would be really interesting to find some research and data to support some of the decisions we make daily. As designers, we know we have options, and those options we make on layout and color and other factors in our design make a big difference to the overall experience. So all of our articles underscore the importance of visual presentation and the impact that they had on user comprehension, influence, and preference. So we started with a hypothesis, and based on this idea of what we wanted to discover, we thought, okay, so we've always heard this idea, this principle, much in line with Norman and Schneiderman, that less complex web pages with more visible tasks would make a better user experience. So we were looking to validate that through our research.
In our research, we came across studies that measured preference, cognition and comprehension, visibility, influence, and memory. All of these areas are important for both HCI and cognitive psychology. We found that HCI is driving towards a person's optimal interaction with a device or system, while psychology provides the foundational principles that allow a designer to optimize these interactions. The first article explored how visual search of web pages was affected by the color of text and background. The study focused on how these differences affected subjective preferences and performance. Repeated measures looked at various text and background color combinations as the independent variable, and performance measures were used to gauge the dependent variables, which were the number of hits, the reaction time, correct rejections, and the time it took to make them. Overall preference and rating of display quality were used as subjective measures in this study. The results showed that a higher contrast between the color of text and background improves visual search and the overall rating of the experience by the user. Since more than 90% of web actions involve navigation, according to Ling and Van Schaik, the proper implementation of contrast and color in the design of an experience is key in successfully guiding a user to complete the tasks that they need.
Our second article was Configural Displays Can Improve Nutritional Related Decisions. And essentially, this article was about label reading. So the researchers came in with an understanding that label reading requires information processing. And this information processing wasn't actually considered when originally designing the labels. So the study wanted to understand if cognitive psychology principles, if they were applied, could make a difference to a person's understanding. So they took 3 tasks based on proximity compatibility principles, which included 2 integration decisions and 1 filtering decision. The first task was the participants had to rate the overall quality of the food on a slider scale. The second, participants had to determine which of 2 presented products was higher nutritional quality. And the third, asked participants to determine how many whole number servings of the product would be required to get to 100% daily recommended value. So what does that mean? That means if you want somebody to compare information, then you want to optimize your visual presentation for comparison. For example, if you look at the graphic on the left, the graphical representation of the relationships are easier and faster to interpret. So if you are somebody who needs to understand the contents of a food label quickly, let's say you have diabetes or something like that, that you need to be very conscientious about what you're eating, then you can identify specific areas of concern very, very quickly.
In the third article titled Visual Complexity of Websites, Effects on Users' Experience, Physiology, Performance, and Memory, the research team was looking for a way to measure the importance of complexity in homepage design and the perception it gave to the user. This is important for a designer who wants to direct a user to a specific action within a page by reducing the noise of competing information. For this, they looked at 36 website homepages of varying complexity, using file size as a determining factor for that. Various tasks were rated by the emotional impact on the test subjects, as well as their recognition 1 week after. They also looked at the level of arousal and physiological responses to determine the pleasure response to each website. Their findings showed that more visual complexity increased arousal, EMG response, and heart rate. In particular, heart rate increases were more related to the pressure and time it took to complete visual searches than to the site complexity alone. The results of the study support the idea that increased complexity increases arousal, decreases preference, and makes a site harder to recall for the user.
In our fourth article, The Effects of Usability and Web Design Attributes on User Preference for E-commerce Websites, the purpose of the research was to investigate relationships among perceived usability pre-use, user performance and preference, and highlight design attributes on user preference. The study was done on 10 grad students with an average age of about 30 years and emphasized e-commerce sites, specifically choosing 9 online bookstores for task completion. These bookstores were not the Amazons and Barnes & Nobles, but much lesser known bookstores so that they can get the pre-use usability assessment. There were 4 hypotheses that the study used. The first was pre-use usability was highly correlated with task completion time. And the task they used to assess this was the Likert scale. The participants essentially looked at the site for 15 minutes before actually doing anything with it to make an assessment. The second was a relationship with pre-use usability and preferences higher than task completion. And the task here was to do 3 specific tasks. They had to find a book, they had to find a help section, and had to complete a form. The third was design attribute assessment after use is highly interrelated. And they used 5 attributes, which consisted of content structure, navigation system, color, topography, and visual organization. The last was user preferences more correlated with aesthetics than organizational structure and layout. The task was again assessed on the Likert scale. The 4 hypotheses had different results. The first one was supported but not fully supported. In general, what they found out that performance task was better with websites whose usability was expected to be better without actual use, but that wasn't applied consistently. So not all participants actually demonstrated that. The second 2 were actually supported. So they did find that pre-usability and preference were a higher correlation than pre-user preference or pre-usability and task completion time. The third, again, was confirmed in that there was definitely a high correlation among the attributes. But in particular, the attributes that were most highly correlated were content, navigation, and visual. So if you happen to be in an organization where you have those disciplines and you've always looked for an argument on why you need to work together, that's why. There's a greater effect of organizational structure and layout on user preference than those of aesthetics. Visual designers don't despair, however, because those aesthetics do create the first impression, and those definitely help instigate preferences. The last was the user preference more correlated with aesthetics was actually not supported. In particular, the color and topography were not indicators of preference. In fact, what they found, though, there was a hierarchy of importance, which had content organization at the top, navigation system second, visual organization, and finally topography and color.
The findings in all these studies have provided us with valuable insights on what designers can do to reach better solutions. From these, we can develop principles that can take design into future directions. For example, it is important to make things readable, as we learned from the first article. The third article showed us how reducing complexity in navigation can improve a website's recognition and reduce memory workload. Defining the primary reaction is key, as described in the second article. Pair tasks with their cognitive processing requirements whenever possible. And improve user focus by simplifying your design. In short, simple things can make a big difference.
Specifically to developing product, we identified insights we thought would be useful to apply as designers. Use visual to obtain preference. We found that visual quality does correlate with the perceived quality of a website, but concentrate on content, visual, and navigation over color and topography. Content, visual, and navigation are highly correlated and they work well together, and when they work well, users will see the difference. Focus on feelings and attitudes after use. This reinforces testing. You want to know what users are feeling about the design you're presenting, and testing will make a world of difference and help you understand exactly what your users need.
Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed the presentation.